Anne of Green Gables. There was a quiet little morning on Prince Edward Island when the story of Anne Shirley began. The sky was pale blue. A soft breeze moved through the green fields, carrying the gentle scent of grass, wildflowers, and distant pine trees. Along the country roads, tiny drops of morning dew rested on leaves like little pieces of glass. It was the kind of morning that seemed made for staying in bed. But at Green Gables, a man named Matthew Cuthbert was already awake. Matthew was a quiet man. He was not fond of noise, crowds, or unnecessary conversation. He preferred the company of trees, horses, fields, and long stretches of peaceful countryside. That morning, he stepped outside his farmhouse and looked toward the road. The farm was surrounded by green fields and tall trees. Beyond them, the land rolled gently toward the distant water. Green Gables had always been a peaceful place. It was home. And yet, that morning, something unexpected was about to arrive. Matthew walked slowly toward the small barn. He had work to do. There were fences to inspect, horses to feed, and fields that needed attention. But before he could begin, he heard the distant sound of wheels. A horse-drawn buggy was coming along the road. Matthew stopped. He looked toward the road again. The buggy grew closer. It was driven by a neighbor named Mrs. Rachel Lynde, who had agreed to meet Matthew at the railway station earlier that morning. Matthew had expected her to bring a boy. A boy was what he and his sister Marilla had requested. They had decided that their farm needed another pair of hands. Matthew was getting older. Marilla was practical and capable, but farming was hard work. So they had made arrangements to bring an orphan boy from the mainland. The boy was supposed to help around Green Gables. Matthew had been thinking about him for several days. He imagined a quiet child, perhaps 12 years old, strong enough to carry things, old enough to understand simple instructions, someone who could help with the horses and fields. But when the buggy stopped in front of the farmhouse, Matthew saw something that made him blink in surprise. There was no boy. Instead, sitting inside the buggy was a thin little girl. She wore a faded brown dress. Her red hair was braided into two long plaits. Her face was small and pale, but her eyes were bright and full of curiosity. She carried an old carpet bag. She sat very straight, as if she were trying her best to appear calm. Matthew stared at her. The little girl stared back. For several seconds, neither of them said anything. Then Matthew quietly removed his hat. "Hello," he said. The girl smiled. "Hello." Matthew looked toward Mrs. Lynde. Mrs. Lynde looked back at him. There was an uncomfortable silence. Finally, Matthew asked, "Where is the boy?" Mrs. Lynde sighed. "There wasn't a boy." Matthew looked confused. The little girl suddenly spoke. "I'm very glad to see you, Mr. Cuthbert." Matthew looked at her again. She continued, "I was beginning to wonder if you had forgotten about me." Matthew did not know what to say. The girl climbed down from the buggy. She carefully placed her carpet bag on the ground. Then she looked around. Her eyes moved across the fields. She looked at the trees. She looked at the farmhouse. She looked at the flowers growing near the fence. Then she smiled. "Oh," she whispered, "this is beautiful." Matthew nodded slowly. "Yes." The little girl turned toward him. "I think I'm going to like it here." Matthew's heart sank. He knew immediately that something had gone terribly wrong. He and Marilla had asked for a boy, not a girl, and certainly not a small, delicate girl who looked as though a strong wind might carry her away. Matthew cleared his throat. "Well," he paused, "I'm afraid there has been some mistake." The girl's smile disappeared. "A mistake?" "Yes." Matthew looked uncomfortable. "Marilla and I were expecting a boy." The little girl's face became very still. For a moment, on a quiet October night in 1936, when the rain had been falling over the little town of Willow Creek for nearly 3 hours, a letter appeared on the doorstep of an old wooden house. There was nothing unusual about a letter, not in Willow Creek. Letters arrived every day. They came with the afternoon mail, carried in a canvas bag by Mr. Hollis, the town postman, who knew nearly everyone by name and most families by the sound of their footsteps. But this letter was different. It arrived at midnight, and there was no name on the envelope, no return address, no stamp, only 6 carefully written words. "Please take this to Willow Lake." The words were written in faded blue ink, and beneath them was a small drawing of a crescent moon. That was all. For several seconds, Clara Whitmore simply stood in the doorway and listened to the rain. She was 34 years old, though the quietness of her life sometimes made her feel older. Her little house stood at the end of Maple Street, where the sidewalks became narrow and the wooden houses slowly gave way to fields. She had lived there alone for almost 6 years. Her father had passed away in the spring of 1930. Her mother had followed him 2 winters later. Since then, Clara had kept the house exactly as they had left it. The brass clock in the hallway, the old photographs above the fireplace, the faded blue curtains in the parlor, and in the kitchen, a small wooden table beside the window where her mother had once rolled out pie dough on Sunday afternoons. Clara had been preparing for bed when she heard the sound. 3 soft knocks, not loud, not urgent, just knock, knock, knock. She'd assumed it was a branch moving in the wind, but when the sound came again, she went downstairs. Now she stood in the doorway, holding the mysterious envelope. Rain whispered against the porch roof. The street was empty. Every house nearby was dark. Far beyond the rooftops, somewhere past the trees, a train whistle drifted through the rain. Long, low, almost musical. Clara looked toward the railroad. There had not been a midnight passenger train through Willow Creek for years, at least not according to the timetable. She looked down at the letter again. The paper was old, older than it looked. And somehow, she recognized the handwriting. She just couldn't remember where she had seen it. Clara stepped inside and closed the door. The warmth of the house surrounded her. The fireplace had nearly burned down, leaving only a few glowing pieces of oak beneath a layer of gray ash. She placed the letter on the kitchen table. Then she made herself a cup of tea. Outside, rain continued to fall, softly, steadily, the kind of rain that made a person want to pull a blanket around their shoulders and listen to the weather moving across the roof. Clara sat beside the window. For a long while, she did nothing, then she picked up the envelope again. The handwriting seemed familiar, very familiar, and beneath the crescent moon was a tiny number. 17. Clara stared at it. 17. She whispered the number to herself. Then she remembered. There had been a photograph her father had kept hidden inside an old wooden box. A photograph taken beside Willow Lake, and written on the back of that photograph was the same number, 17. Clara placed her cup down. The rain seemed quieter now. The clock in the hallway ticked. Once, twice, 3 times, and somewhere in the distance the train whistle sounded again. Clara looked toward the dark window, then toward the letter, and for the first time in many years, she felt that the past might have something left to say. By morning, the rain had softened to a mist. Willow Creek looked almost unchanged. It was the kind of American town where mornings began slowly. The bakery opened before sunrise. The grocer swept the sidewalk. A newspaper boy rode his bicycle along Main Street. The barber turned a small brass sign from closed to open. And every morning at 8 o'clock, the clock in the courthouse tower chimed. Clara walked downtown beneath a gray October sky. She carried the letter inside her coat pocket. The mysterious envelope seemed heavier than paper should have felt. Perhaps because of what it contained, or perhaps because of what it reminded her of. At the corner of Main Street and Oak Avenue stood Whitaker's General Store. It had been there since 1898. The wooden floor creaked beneath every step. Shelves reached almost to the ceiling. There were jars of peppermint candy near the counter, sacks of flour stacked against the back wall, and a small iron stove that kept the whole store warm. Mr. Whitaker was 72 and seemed to know everything that happened in Willow Creek. Clara found him reading the morning newspaper beside the stove. "Morning, Clara." "Morning, Mr. Whitaker." He lowered the newspaper. "You look like you've got a question." Clara smiled faintly. "Do I?" "You've got your father's look." That made her pause. "Did you know my father well?" Mr. Whitaker folded the newspaper. "Everyone knew your father." Clara hesitated, then she took the letter from her coat. "I found this last night." Mr. Whitaker looked at the envelope. His expression changed, only slightly, but Clara noticed. He reached for his spectacles. "Where did you get that?" "My doorstep." "When?" "Midnight." He looked toward the front window. Rainwater shimmered along the street. "That's an old kind of paper. Do you recognize the handwriting?" Mr. Whitaker did not answer immediately. Instead, he walked to the back of the store. After a moment, he returned carrying a small wooden box. It was dark with age. A brass clasp held it shut. He placed it on the counter. "I haven't opened this in 20 years, he said. Clara looked at him. "Why?" "Because your father asked me not to." Her heart gave a small, unexpected beat. "My father gave this to you?" "Yes." "When?" "The summer before he died." Mr. Whitaker rested one hand on the box. "He told me that if you ever came asking about Willow Lake, I should give it to you." Clara stared at him. "I've never asked about Willow Lake." "No." He looked at the letter. "But somebody seems to think you should." The store became very quiet. Outside, a truck rolled slowly through the wet street. Somewhere upstairs, an old clock ticked. Mr. Whitaker opened the box. Inside was a photograph, a black and white photograph of Willow Lake. There were trees around the water, a wooden dock, a small rowboat, and standing near the edge of the lake were 5 young people. Clara recognized her father immediately. He was perhaps 23 years old. Beside him stood a young woman with dark hair. Clara had never seen her before. She wore a light-colored dress and held a small book against her chest. On the back of the photograph were several words. Clara turned it over. Her father's handwriting was unmistakable. Willow Lake, October 17th, 1925, and beneath the date, "Some promises take longer than others." Clara looked up. "Who is she?" Mr. Whitaker sighed. "I was hoping you wouldn't ask." "Why?" "Because I don't know if your father ever wanted you to know." Clara looked at the young woman's face. There was something peaceful about her expression, almost as if she were looking toward something just beyond the camera. "What's her name?" Mr. Whitaker slowly shook his head. "Her name was Evelyn." Clara waited. "Evelyn what?" He looked toward the rain-covered window. "That's the part nobody remembers." The house near the lake. That afternoon, Clara walked to the library. The Willow Creek Public Library occupied a small brick building beside the courthouse. It had once been a schoolhouse. The shelves were filled with old newspapers, local histories, cookbooks, novels, and boxes of photographs donated by families over the years. Clara knew the librarian, Mrs. Ellison, who had been quietly organizing the town archives for nearly 30 years. When Clara showed her the photograph, Mrs. Ellison adjusted her glasses. "Evelyn," she said. "You know her?" "I know the name." She walked toward a cabinet. "Not the person." From a drawer, she removed a large ledger. It contained handwritten records from the 1920s, births, deaths, property transfers, marriage announcements, train schedules, old town events. Clara turned pages slowly, then Mrs. Ellison stopped. There it was. Evelyn Hart. Clara leaned closer. "That's her?" Mrs. Ellison shook her head. "Perhaps." The entry was strange. There was no birth date, no family listed, only an address, the Lake House, Willow Road. Clara knew the house. Everyone did. It stood beyond the eastern edge of town near the water. It had been empty for years. The house was large and white with a wide porch and tall windows. Children sometimes dared each other to walk past it after sunset. Adults simply called it the old lake house. Clara had never been inside. Mrs. Ellison continued reading. She rented the house for 1 month. When? October of 1925. Clara looked at the photograph. October 17th, exactly 11 years before the letter had arrived. Why did she come here? Mrs. Ellison turned another page. I don't know. There must be something. There usually is. The librarian smiled gently. She pulled another folder from the cabinet. Inside was an old newspaper clipping. The headline was small. Local musician visits Willow Creek. Clara read it. Evelyn Hart had apparently been a pianist who traveled from town to town. She had stayed near Willow Lake while preparing for a concert in Chicago. The article mentioned that she had spent many evenings walking beside the lake. Then, beneath the article, another handwritten note appeared. She left something at the station. Clara looked up. What does that mean? Mrs. Ellison frowned. I don't know. Who wrote this? I believe your father did. Clara felt the familiar chill of recognition. Her father had known Evelyn. But why? And why had he kept the photograph? Mrs. Ellison closed the folder. Clara, sometimes old stories are better left sleeping. Clara looked at the photograph. Maybe. Then she smiled. But sometimes they wake up. Mrs. Ellison laughed softly. Your father used to say exactly that. Outside, the afternoon light was fading. Clouds had gathered over the lake. Clara slipped the photograph back into her coat. As she walked home, the first drops of evening rain began to fall, and somewhere far away, the train sounded again. That night, Clara could not sleep. The house was warm. The fireplace was glowing. Rain tapped softly against the bedroom window. Still, sleep would not come. At 11:30, she made tea. At 11:45, she checked the front door. At 11:50, she heard the train. This time it sounded closer. Clara stood very still. The whistle faded. Then came the faint rhythm of wheels. Slow, measured, almost gentle. She remembered something Mr. Whitaker had said. She left something at the station. Clara put on her coat. She took the letter, and she walked toward the railroad station. The streets were empty. Rain had covered the sidewalks in silver. Porch lights glowed softly behind curtains. A wind moved through the trees, leaves gathered along the gutters. The courthouse clock showed 12 minutes past midnight. The station was nearly dark. The old waiting room smelled faintly of coal smoke and damp wood. Clara entered. A single lamp hung from the ceiling. She sat on the wooden bench. For several minutes she heard nothing. Then, a soft sound, not a train, a piano. Clara turned. The sound came from somewhere beyond the waiting room. 3 notes, then silence. 3 more. She stood. The station had been closed for hours. There was no piano inside. She walked slowly down the hallway. At the end was a locked door. Behind it, nothing. Only the rain. Clara returned to the waiting room. On the bench where she had been sitting was something that had not been there before. A small brass key. Attached to it was a paper tag. On the tag were 2 words, Lake House. Clara stared at it. She did not touch it immediately. Instead, she listened to the rain. She listened to the clock. She listened to the distant wind. Then she picked up the key. It was cold in her hand, and somehow she knew exactly what door it belonged to. The following morning was clear. The rain had washed the world clean. Leaves glittered beneath the pale autumn sunlight. Clara walked along Willow Road toward the lake. The old house appeared between the trees. White paint, green shutters, a wide porch, tall windows. The roof was covered in damp leaves. A wooden swing hung near the front door. It moved slightly in the breeze. Clara climbed the steps. The brass key fit perfectly. The lock turned. The door opened with a long, soft creak. Inside, the house smelled of cedar, dust, and old fireplaces. Sunlight entered through the curtains. There were rooms filled with furniture covered in white sheets. A piano stood in the parlor. Its keys were yellowed with age. Clara approached it. She touched one key. A soft note filled the room. She remembered the 3 notes from the station. Then she noticed something on the piano, a small envelope. Her name was written on it, Clara. She opened it carefully. Inside was a single page. The handwriting was the same as the letter. "If you are reading this, the house has waited long enough?" Clara sat down. Her hands trembled slightly. The letter continued, "Your father promised he would return something that belonged to me. He kept his promise in the only way he knew how, but he could not finish the journey." Clara read the words twice, then she noticed another line, "Look beneath the 17th floorboard." She looked at the wooden floor. There were hundreds of boards, but near the fireplace, one looked slightly different. Clara knelt. She touched it. It moved. Beneath it was a small metal box. She lifted it carefully. Inside was a diary. The cover was faded blue. On the first page was a name, Evelyn Hart. Clara began reading. Evelyn had written about Willow Creek in simple sentences. She described the lake, the trees, the sound of trains at night, the smell of rain, the old house, and a young man named Samuel Whitmore, Clara's father. Evelyn had met Samuel beside the lake in October of 1925. He had been 23, she had been 21. They had spent several evenings walking along the water. They talked about books, music, travel, family, dreams. Nothing dramatic, nothing extraordinary, just 2 young people talking while autumn leaves drifted across the lake. Clara smiled. That sounded like her father. He had always loved quiet conversations. Evelyn wrote that she planned to leave town after her concert, but she had something to give Samuel, a letter. She had written it for her younger brother, Thomas. Thomas lived far away. They had argued before she left home. She wanted Samuel to mail the letter for her, but the letter never arrived. Instead, Samuel promised to deliver it himself. Years passed. Evelyn moved away. Samuel remained in Willow Creek. They exchanged only a few letters. Then Evelyn's life changed. Her music career ended. Her mother became ill. She returned home, and eventually, the world became larger and more complicated. But she never forgot the lake. At the end of one diary entry, she wrote, "Sometimes a promise is not about the person who receives it. Sometimes it is about the person who makes it." Clara closed the diary. Outside, the lake was perfectly still. A breeze moved through the trees. She turned another page. There was a final entry, dated October 17th, 1925, the day of the photograph. Samuel says he will keep the letter safe. He says that one day, when the time is right, he will return it. Then one final sentence, "I believe him." Clara sat quietly. Her father had carried that promise for 11 years, but what had happened to the letter? She continued searching the diary. Nothing, no answer, only one clue, a small drawing of a train. And beneath it, Willow Creek's old train station had changed little since 1925. The railroad still ran along the eastern edge of town. Freight trains passed occasionally. Passenger trains were less common. Clara visited the station during the afternoon. The station master, Mr. Benson, was a quiet man who had worked there since he was 19. When Clara asked about car 17, he frowned. "Passenger car?" "I think so." He thought for a moment. "Could be." "Do you remember Evelyn Hart?" Mr. Benson smiled. "Everyone remembers Evelyn?" Clara looked surprised. "How?" "She played piano in the station once." "When?" 1925. "What happened?" "Nothing happened." He chuckled. "That's why people remember it." He explained that Evelyn had arrived on an evening train. She had missed her connection. While waiting, she noticed an old piano in the waiting room. She played for nearly an hour. People gathered quietly. Nobody had planned it. Nobody had advertised it. The station simply became still. Passengers listened. Children stopped running. Workers paused. Even the station master stood near the door. Clara imagined it. A rainy evening, an old piano, a young woman playing softly while a train waited outside. "Do you remember what she played?" Mr. Benson nodded. "Something about the moon." Clara smiled. "Of course." Mr. Benson walked toward a filing cabinet. After several minutes, he returned with an old train register. He opened it. There it was. October 17th, 1925, train 17, passenger car 17, destination Chicago. Mr. Benson pointed to a note, one envelope left in seat 12. Clara's heart quickened. Did anyone collect it? Samuel Whitmore. Her father. She closed her eyes. The mystery was becoming clearer. But something still didn't make sense. Why had the letter returned now? Why had it been left on her doorstep? And who had written the note? Mr. Benson seemed to understand her question. He reached beneath the counter. I have something else. He handed Clara an old photograph. It showed the station in 1925. Evelyn stood beside the piano. Samuel stood near the train door, and behind them was an older woman. Clara recognized her. It was Evelyn's mother. On the back of the photograph was another message. The letter was never meant for Thomas. Clara stared at it. Then who was it for? Mr. Benson looked toward the window. The truth, I suppose. That evening, Clara returned to the lake house. The sunset was soft and golden. The lake reflected the sky. A few birds moved across the water. She lit the fireplace. The room slowly warmed. Then she opened Evelyn's diary again. The final pages had been folded together. Clara had not noticed before. Inside the fold was another sheet. This one was not written in Evelyn's handwriting. It was her father's. Evelyn, I read your letter. I understand why you don't want it sent, but I think someday you will want the truth to reach him, so I will keep it safe. Not forever, only until you are ready. Clara stopped. She read the next line, and if neither of us is here when that day comes, perhaps someone else will understand. There was no signature, but Clara knew her father had never forgotten. She searched the room, the piano, the desk, the fireplace, the shelves. Then she noticed a small wooden clock above the mantel. It had stopped at 12:17. She removed it from the wall. Behind it was a narrow compartment. Inside was another envelope. This one was yellow with age. Clara knew immediately. This was the letter. The letter that had traveled through 11 years. The letter that had been hidden in a train, carried by her father, kept inside a lake house, and finally returned to her. Her hands shook as she opened it, but she did not read it immediately. Instead, she sat beside the fire. Outside, evening settled over Willow Lake. The first stars appeared, the trees whispered. The house creaked gently around her. She wrapped herself in an old wool blanket and slowly unfolded the letter. The letter was addressed to Thomas, but it was not a letter of anger. It was a letter of forgiveness. Evelyn wrote about the argument they had shared. She wrote about how young they both had been, how pride could make small things seem enormous. She wrote that she was sorry. She wrote that she missed him. She wrote that she hoped he had built a peaceful life. And then she wrote something Clara did not expect. If you never answer, I will understand. I only want you to know that I remembered you kindly. Clara read slowly. The fireplace crackled. Rain began tapping against the windows again. The words felt strangely modern. People had always wanted the same things: forgiveness, home, peace, the feeling of being remembered. At the bottom of the letter was a final paragraph. Samuel says he will keep this until the right time. I trust him. And if the right time never comes, then let the letter rest. Clara lowered the page. She understood now. Her father had not forgotten the promise. He had protected Evelyn's privacy. He had waited, but Evelyn had never returned, and Samuel had never found the right moment. Years later, before his death, he had given the box to Mr. Whitaker. He had told him to give it to Clara if she ever asked about Willow Lake. But Clara had never asked. So the story remained asleep until the letter appeared. Clara looked toward the lake. Perhaps some mysteries were not solved by discovering something new. Perhaps they were solved by finally understanding something old. She folded the letter. Then she noticed something on the back. A second message, written in her father's handwriting, for Clara when she is old enough to understand. Her breath caught. She turned the page. Clara read her father's words. "My dear Clara, if you have found this, then you are probably wondering why I kept so many things from you. The truth is simple. Some stories belong to people who are no longer here to tell them. I wanted to protect Evelyn's memory, but I also wanted to teach you something. A person can carry a promise for years without feeling its weight, not because the promise is small, because love makes certain burdens gentle." Clara wiped a tear from her cheek. She continued, "I don't know whether Evelyn ever learned what happened to her brother. I don't know whether she ever forgave herself. But I know she forgave him, and perhaps that is enough." At the bottom was one final sentence. "When you are ready, return the letter to the lake." Clara sat motionless. The room was warm. The rain had become softer. She read the sentence again. "Return the letter to the lake. Not burn it, not mail it, not hide it. Return it." She understood. The letter had spent 11 years waiting. Perhaps its journey was finally over. Clara waited until midnight. The town was quiet. The rain had stopped. Clouds moved slowly across the moon. She walked down to Willow Lake carrying the letter. The forest path was damp beneath her shoes. Leaves whispered underfoot. The trees leaned gently over the trail. Far away, the train passed through the darkness. Its wheels made a soft rhythm. Clara stopped to listen. She could imagine her father here, young, 23 years old, walking beside Evelyn, talking about the future, talking about music, talking about nothing at all. The lake appeared between the trees. Moonlight rested on the water. The old dock stretched into the lake. Clara walked to the end. She held the letter. Then she remembered her father's words. She did not throw it into the water. Instead, she opened the small wooden box that had held the diary. Inside was a dry compartment. She placed the letter there. Then she placed the diary beside it and closed the lid. She understood now. The lake did not need to swallow the past. It only needed to hold it. Clara sat on the dock. The night was beautiful. A light breeze moved across the water. The moon appeared between the clouds. Somewhere in the woods, an owl called once. Then silence. Clara felt something she had not felt in years. Peace. She had spent much of her adult life believing that the past was something to escape. But perhaps the past was not a road behind us. Perhaps it was simply a house. A quiet house. A place we could visit. A place where old memories waited without asking us to stay. Clara smiled. She pulled her coat around her shoulders and watched the moonlight tremble on the lake. The next morning, Clara returned to town. She carried the photograph with her. At the library, Mrs. Ellison was waiting. "You found it," she said. Clara nodded. "Yes." "Did you read it?" "Yes." Mrs. Ellison smiled. "And?" Clara looked through the window. The courthouse clock was beginning to chime. "I think Evelyn was waiting for someone to remember her." Mrs. Ellison considered this. "Perhaps." Clara handed her the photograph. Mrs. Ellison studied it, then she turned it over. There was something beneath the old writing, a second layer of paper. She carefully removed it. Underneath was another name, Evelyn Marie Hart. Mrs. Ellison's eyes widened. "Marie? What?" "Her full name," Clara smiled. "Now we know." Mrs. Ellison sat down. "I wonder why nobody remembered." Clara looked at the photograph. "Because people sometimes disappear from history without really disappearing." The librarian nodded. Together they placed the photograph in the town archive. They wrote Evelyn's full name. They recorded her story. They preserved the diary. They preserved the letter. And beneath the photograph, Clara wrote one sentence. She came to Willow Creek in October of 1925, and for a little while, the town remembered her music. That afternoon, Clara visited Mr. Whitaker. He was sitting beside the stove. She told him everything. He listened quietly. When she finished, he smiled. "Your father would have liked that?" "I think so." Mr. Whitaker looked toward the window. "You know, Clara, there was one thing your father always said." "What?" He said the lake kept memories better than people did. Clara smiled. Maybe that's why he trusted it. November arrived, then December. Willow Creek changed with the seasons. The leaves disappeared. The lake became silver beneath cold skies. Chimneys sent thin columns of smoke into the morning air. Windows glowed warmly in the evenings. People walked faster along Main Street. The bakery smelled of cinnamon. The general store kept its iron stove burning all day. And Clara's house became warmer than it had been in years. She began lighting the fireplace every evening. She bought new curtains for the parlor. She placed fresh flowers on the kitchen table. And beside the fireplace, she placed the photograph of Evelyn. Not hidden, not forgotten, just there. One evening, Clara received a letter. It was from Chicago. Inside was a short note from a man named Thomas Hart, Evelyn's brother. He was 80 years old. He had seen the newspaper article about the photograph. He had never known Evelyn had kept his old letter, and he had spent 55 years wondering whether she had ever forgiven him. Clara wrote back. She told him only what Evelyn had written, that she remembered him kindly, that she was sorry, that she hoped he had lived peacefully, and that the letter had finally reached the place where it belonged. Thomas never visited Willow Creek, but he sent one final photograph. It showed Evelyn as a young girl beside a piano. On the back were 6 words. She always loved the sound of rain. Clara placed the photograph beside the first one, and that night, when rain began tapping against the windows, she sat beside the fire and listened. For the first time, she imagined Evelyn listening too. Somewhere beyond time, somewhere beneath another October moon, listening to the same rain. Christmas Eve arrived quietly. Snow covered Willow Creek. The streets were almost empty. Yellow light shone from the windows of old wooden houses. A wreath hung on the courthouse door. The bakery had closed early. Children had gone home. And somewhere near the lake, snow settled softly among the trees. Clara sat beside the fireplace with a blanket around her shoulders. The clock ticked. The fire crackled. The town slept. Then she heard it. A train. She smiled. The sound moved through the night. Slow, steady, comforting. Clara walked to the window. For a moment, moonlight appeared between the clouds. The snow-covered street seemed almost blue, and in the distance, the train passed beyond the trees. Clara remembered the letter, the photograph, the lake, her father, Evelyn. All of it seemed connected now, not by mystery, but by time. A long, gentle thread running through ordinary lives. She returned to the fireplace. The room was warm. She made tea. Then she sat in her father's old chair. For a few minutes, she closed her eyes. She could hear the fire, the wind, the clock, the distant train, and beneath all of it, the quiet breathing of the sleeping town. Clara thought about how many stories must exist in old houses, how many letters had been written, how many promises had been made, how many people had stood beside lakes and watched the moon. Most of those stories were never recorded, but perhaps they did not need to be. Perhaps a life did not have to become famous to matter. Sometimes it was enough to have loved someone, to have forgiven someone, to have kept a promise, to have left a small kindness behind. Clara opened her eyes. The fire had burned low. She added another piece of wood. The flames rose gently, then settled. Outside, snow continued falling. By April, Willow Creek had changed again. Snow disappeared. Grass returned. The first leaves appeared on the trees. Willow Lake reflected the pale green of spring. Clara walked there often. She had begun carrying a small notebook. Not to write mysteries, just memories. She wrote down things she wanted to remember. The sound of rain, the smell of bread from the bakery, the way moonlight looked on the lake, the sound of the evening train, the warmth of her father's chair, the old clock in the hallway, the way her mother's kitchen looked in afternoon sunlight. She realized that memory did not have to be painful. Sometimes memory was simply another kind of home. One evening, she sat beside the lake. A gentle wind moved across the water. The forest whispered. The sun disappeared behind the trees, then the first stars appeared. Clara opened her notebook. She wrote October 17th, 1925, then beneath it, "Some promises take longer than others." She smiled. The words no longer felt mysterious. They felt peaceful. Years later, people in Willow Creek still talked about the lake house, but the story changed. Children heard that a mysterious letter had appeared one rainy night. Older residents remembered Evelyn's music. The library preserved the photograph. The lake house eventually became a small retreat for visiting musicians, and every autumn on October 17th, someone placed flowers beside the old piano. No one called it a haunted house. No one whispered about ghosts. There was nothing frightening there, only memory, only music, only the sound of wind moving through old trees. Clara eventually understood the greatest mystery. The letter had never really been about Evelyn, not entirely. It had been about her father, about the promise he had carried, about the kindness of waiting, about the strange way that one person's unfinished story can quietly touch another person's life many years later. And perhaps that was why the letter had arrived. Not because someone from the past had returned, but because Clara was finally ready to listen. The mystery had not been solved with a secret door, or a hidden treasure, or some dramatic revelation. It had been solved with understanding, and understanding, Clara discovered, was often much quieter than people expected. Years later, people in Willow Creek still talked about the lake house, but the story changed. Children heard that a mysterious letter had appeared one rainy night. Older residents remembered Evelyn's music. The library preserved the photograph. The lake house eventually became a small retreat for visiting musicians. And every autumn, on October 17th, someone placed flowers beside the old piano. No one called it a haunted house. No one whispered about ghosts. There was nothing frightening there, only memory, only music, only the sound of wind moving through old trees. Clara eventually understood the greatest mystery. The letter had never really been about Evelyn. Not entirely. Years passed. Clara grew older. The town changed. Cars became more common. The old train station was repaired. Some wooden houses disappeared. New buildings appeared. But Willow Lake remained. The forest remained. And the moon continued to rise above the water. One autumn evening, Clara returned to the lake house. She was older now. Her hair had turned silver. She walked slowly along the path. Leaves fell around her. The house stood quietly beneath the trees. Inside, the old piano remained. Clara sat on the bench. She placed her fingers on the keys. Then she played the 3 notes she had heard at the station. 3 soft notes, the same notes Evelyn had played. Clara smiled. She played them again. Outside, the wind moved through the trees. The lake reflected the moon. And somewhere far away, a train traveled through the darkness. Its whistle drifted across the water, long, soft, peaceful. Clara closed her eyes for a moment. She could almost imagine the whole town as it had been in 1925. Young people walking beside the lake, warm lamps glowing in windows, rain falling on wooden roofs, a train waiting at the station, a young woman sitting at an old piano, a young man listening quietly, and somewhere a letter waiting for the right time. Clara opened her eyes. The room was still. The mystery was gone, but the feeling remained. A feeling like being remembered, a feeling like coming home. It had been about her father, about the promise he had carried, about the kindness of waiting, about the strange way that one person's unfinished story can quietly touch another person's life many years later. And perhaps that was why the letter had arrived, not because someone from the past had returned, but because Clara was finally ready to listen. The mystery had not been solved with a secret door, or a hidden treasure, or some dramatic revelation. It had been solved with understanding. And understanding, Clara discovered, was often much quieter than people expected. Years passed. Clara grew older. The town changed. Cars became more common. The old train station was repaired. Some wooden houses disappeared. New buildings appeared. But Willow Lake remained, the forest remained, and the moon continued to rise above the water. One autumn evening, Clara returned to the lake house. She was older now. Her hair had turned silver. She walked slowly along the path. Leaves fell around her. The house stood quietly beneath the trees. Inside, the old piano remained. Clara sat on the bench. She placed her fingers on the keys. Then she played the 3 notes she had heard at the station. 3 soft notes, the same notes Evelyn had played. Clara smiled. She played them again. Outside, the wind moved through the trees. The lake reflected the moon, and somewhere far away, a train traveled through the darkness. Its whistle drifted across the water, long, soft, peaceful. Clara closed her eyes. For a moment, she could almost imagine the whole town as it had been in 1925. Young people walking beside the lake, warm lamps glowing in windows, rain falling on wooden roofs, a train waiting at the station, a young woman sitting at an old piano, a young man listening quietly, and somewhere, a letter waiting for the right time. Clara opened her eyes. The room was still. The mystery was gone. But the feeling remained, a feeling like being remembered, a feeling like coming home. Chapter 18, Tonight Willow Creek. And so, the story of the midnight letter came to an end. Not with a grand discovery, not with a secret revealed beneath the earth, but with something much gentler, a promise kept, a memory returned, a forgiveness finally understood, and a quiet little town continuing to sleep beneath the moon. Tonight, Willow Creek is peaceful. The streets are empty. The old wooden houses rest beneath the trees. Curtains move softly behind warm windows. A fireplace glows somewhere in the distance. The courthouse clock marks another quiet hour. And beyond the town, Willow Lake lies beneath the stars. The water is almost perfectly still. A few clouds drift across the moon. The forest breathes softly in the night wind. Leaves move along the path, and somewhere beyond the trees, a train passes. You can hear it from far away. First, only the faint rhythm of the wheels, then the low hum of the engine, then the long, gentle whistle. It doesn't sound lonely. It sounds like a reminder that time keeps moving. Slowly, quietly, carrying old stories toward new places, carrying memories from one generation to another, and sometimes carrying a letter exactly where it was always meant to go. The train disappears into the distance. The sound becomes softer, softer still, until there is only the wind and the rain beginning again. A few gentle drops touch the roof. Tap, tap, tap. The fireplace glows, the room is warm. A soft blanket rests around your shoulders. Outside, the night is cool. Inside, everything is safe. The old wooden house settles quietly. The clock continues ticking. One moment, then another. There is nowhere you need to go. Nothing you need to solve. No mystery waiting for you tonight. The story is finished. The letter has been delivered. The promise has been kept. The lake is quiet. The town is sleeping. And the moon is shining gently over Willow Creek. So let the old road disappear behind you. Let the sound of the train grow distant. Let the rain become softer. Let the fire become a warm glow behind closed eyes. Imagine the lake beneath the moon. Imagine the trees moving slowly in the wind. Imagine a small house with golden light in every window. A place where old memories are safe. A place where forgotten stories can rest. A place where every promise has finally found its way home. The night is peaceful. The town is quiet. The lake is still. And somewhere beneath the stars, an old wooden house waits patiently among the trees. Not for another mystery, not for another letter, only for the morning. And morning will come gently. There will be birdsong. There will be sunlight on the lake. There will be warm coffee in the kitchen. There will be footsteps on the sidewalk, and somewhere in Willow Creek, the clock will begin another day. But for now, there is only night, only rain, only moonlight, Only the quiet rhythm of the world resting, so let your thoughts become lighter. Let the old story fade slowly, like a train disappearing beyond the hills, like ripples fading across a lake, like the final ember glowing inside a fireplace. Everything is quiet now, everything is safe, and the little town of Willow Creek is sleeping beneath the moon. Good night, Willow Creek. Good night, Willow Lake. Good night to the old wooden houses. Good night to the quiet streets. Good night to the distant train. And good night to all the stories that found their way home. The rain continues softly. The fire glows. The clock ticks. The lake dreams beneath the stars, and the night goes on, peacefully, slowly, quietly, until morning.